Welcome, everybody, to another special bonus episode of the Hoots Podcast. Hope you guys are enjoying it. Thursday, September 8th, 2022. It's yours truly, Joshie Lopez. I am joined by a talented writer, a good broadcaster. Make sure you check out Walkway to Fight Club, his podcast. It's damn good. Also, a tremendous writer and combat sports reporter from the DAZN, my mentor, my friend, the one and only Steve Muehlhausen. What's going on, Oos?
What's going on, Oos? We were just talking about Ooses, actually. But no, man, things are good. Can't complain. There's been a couple things going on this week. So, life's been a little hectic than usual. And I'll say this out front first. Thank you for having me on. It's always appreciated. Good to reconnect and talk a little shop. And I just want to say, wrestling is not my lane, and everyone has this worldwide assumption that, this is everything I do for a living. But I cover boxing, cover MMA. Wrestling is and I was saying it to my boss earlier, I view it as a side project, even though it's not. I watch every show. I cover all the major premium live events, pay-per-views. I'll do interviews around those big events and stuff like that. But okay, go ahead. It's outside my lane, not outside my lane, but I kind of just I can jump in and out and go from here and there. But
right,
I'm tired. Not gonna lie, it's been a very tiring. I love reporting, and you know this. When we were just talking about, I love reporting. I can break a boxing story. I can go break a UFC story. And then my life is, it'll get a little buzz for a couple hours. My phone will blow up and then it's done.
Right.
This is taken on a completely different, and this is where I'll give flowers to the Nick Hausmans, the Sean Ross Sapps, the Dave Meltzers, the Brian Alvarez of the world, regardless of what anyone thinks of them. And I know everyone's got different opinions, and I respect those. This job is rough.
It is.
Being what they do, I've taken and I've reached out to all of them and have had this conversation with them. I have more of an appreciation and respect for what they do, because wrestling journalists get, fair or not, get a bad rap. I think all journalists in general get a bad rap.
Yeah.
I'm not the world's biggest fan of, and I don't know if you say this, I'm not a fan of the word when people say dirt sheet. It sounds sleazy. I think it demeans wrestling, if I'm going to be frank. And in this instance, this guy's got a job. And it's a hard one, because you're trying to gather a bunch of different sides and try to find the truth somewhere in between. And I said this on Twitter yesterday, because I saw Sean Ross Sapp had posted something, and I just put something out there, and me and him talked for a minute. But I was like, and you know this, he said, she said, the truth is somewhere in here. Because I've heard both sides, I've reported on both sides. As have some other people. The truth is somewhere in here.
Yeah.
We just don't know exactly where that's at yet. And we're going to find out, I think, sooner. The investigation is going to go on, which it should. And I'll give Tony Khan as much credit as he should be getting flack. What he did last night, I thought, was he made all the right moves. Whether he was forced to or not, those decisions were made, and he's got to make them. And I thought he did fair in that. And doing a third-party investigation, I thought, is what is needed in something like this. Instead of trying to handle it internally, let outside sources come in, let them handle it, and then Tony gets whatever the reports are, and then he's going to have a decision to make after that.
As for right now, as you guys see the title of this video, we're obviously going to be talking about the biggest news story that's been going on for the last couple of months outside of Vince McMahon in the wrestling landscape in 2022. as of right now, it's literally noon here in Chicago on a Thursday. Right now, CM Punk is no longer the AEW World Champion. The Young Bucks and Kenny Omega are no longer the AEW World Trio Champion. The Elite are suspended. There's other suspensions, and we'll get into that with the brawl and everything in a couple of minutes. But there's a lot of aspects in this conversation and everything that's been going on that hasn't been discussed in a way. And I'm glad to have you here with your experience so we can talk about this from a media point of view. I think the product right now, and I agree with everything you just said about Tony Khan. You know, there's been debates about when Tony should have made this announcement and shown all that stuff. I really don't care about that. That's not pertinent to the bigger issues going on behind the scenes at that company. Whether Tony should start this 8:00 hour or whatever. That's not important to me as far as what the more important issues are right now. And for here, I want to really talk about the scrum, because there's a lot that came out of it. And I think this can be very informative, especially for those who want to get into this field of wrestling media, broadcasting, just journalism in general. And for those who don't know, if you haven't seen this, the video's out there. You can go see it for yourself. Much to my surprise, the biggest person that made an ass out of himself in Chicago, outside of our own Chicago White Sox and Tony La Russa, is our own CM Punk this past weekend. And when the scrum started, I was towards the end of doing my transcript for All Out. I was almost done. Usually when it comes to pay-per-views, I'm usually 25 minutes behind once the show's over when I'm typing out matches. So I believe I was on the trios match with House of Black and Sting and Miro when all this was started. I had it on in the background. I'll be honest with you, I kind of mute commentary when the shows go on. I got to the point where I could just type out the action for what I see in the ring and just go from there. So I was hearing this, and it just starts mid-sentence. You don't hear nothing from Tony. You don't hear first question out. You're there. CM Punk comes in and already just starts shooting daggers at Nick Hausman. And I want to get into this really quick. I want to give credit to Nick Hausman. I'll be honest with you. I feel a lot of times these AEW particular media scrums have become a clusterfuck in optics and just how the message is sent throughout the company. And he's one of the few reporters out there that's not trying to get a pat in the back from Tony Khan, in my opinion. He's there to ask questions to be asked, and I have a lot of respect for him. But I'll say this, and the way Tony's kind of handled Nick in the past, I think it's been kind of unfair when it came to certain questions. And I get it. There's a rapport with promoters and journalists and all that. We can get to that too. But what happened with Tony and CM Punk at the same time towards Nick Hausman, I thought was unprofessional and unnecessary. Because there's a lot that goes into this backstory. You know, Punk is like, hey, are you friends with Scott Colton? Are you still doing your comedic shtick? Yeah, everybody that knows that story, they've done comedy shows with each other, but you two have a particular tie to this story. Not only Nick Hausman was covering the trial when CM Punk was suing Dr. Chris Saman, you, my friend, were there as well covering that trial. And there's a lot. I really want to talk about Uncle Ben here, but first off, how you felt about how Nick was being treated right out of the gate by Punk and kind of him being singled out like that to start things off?
I think it really wasn't, and I've made this clear to Nick, and I talked to Nick afterwards, and I told him, I don't think he singled you out. You were getting ready, and he knew this. He was getting ready to ask a question, and Punk saw him, because Punk came in, he surveyed the room. He saw Nick, he saw me, he saw Dave, he saw Brian, and he saw Will Washington from Fightful, and forget the one other guy. I forget his name. Oh my God, I don't want to do this because
Phil?
Phil, no, he doesn't know Phil. He knows me, Will, Brian, Dave, and Izzy.
Oh, Izzy.
And who, by the way, I want to give her props because I thought she asked one of the better questions. She asked, I thought, a really good question. I think it was the Tony Khan. I thought it was a really, really good question. And Nick was right there. And for people back, I'll go back a little bit and then go right into what he did, what was said. And like we said earlier, and I told you this off air, I had talked to some people that know this situation. He was going to come in and say this. It wasn't a matter of, he just thought of it right on the fly. No, I want to make that abundantly clear.
Yeah.
He was going to say this. He had it planned out. Nick, because I had known Nick worked with Cole. I've known that for 4 or 5 years. I knew that since that trial, Punk and Cabana, when they were dealing with the WWE trial. I knew that thing because I asked him, like, hey, because they were very friendly. I'm like, hey, how do you know him? And he told me, he said, we improv. And because I knew Nick used to do improv. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm like, I didn't think nothing of it. And so I kind of hit it, like, right when Nick, he saw that. He knew Nick. He saw Nick. He's like, all right, Nick's there. I'll bring this up, see and ask. And then it went on, and Nick didn't take no offense. Because in this game, you got to have thick skin.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what reporting you do, whether it's wrestling, politics, other sports, entertainment. It doesn't matter. General news reporting. You have to have thick skin. You can't take nothing the guys or girls say personally. You can't. I learned that very quickly. You can't do that. There's more important matters in the world.
Yeah.
There is. Like you said, Nick's had his issues with Tony, and I really don't think he has. Like, Nick's a blunt guy, as am I. And me and Nick were talking about this actually during the show, and I know he wouldn't mind me revealing this. We got a job to do.
Yeah.
The job is about, it's not what, I know this gets misconstrued and people, I sometimes don't understand. It's not what we want to hear. We survey comments, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We're surveying for our friends, just having conversations. We're asking questions that the fans want to know. That's why I asked Tony, how do you de-escalate this situation? You have your biggest mainstream attraction, your biggest star, rail and have issues with your EVPs and a guy who's the future of the company. Because Hangman Page is, and the plan has always been, he's going to be the face of this company.
Yeah.
Once, Jericho rides off in the sunset. Same thing with Danielson, Punk. The whole intention is to center the company around this guy. How do you try to I can actually use the exact wordings. I got it right here on my phone, and I can tell you exactly how I worded it. There we go. How he can diffuse a dicey situation. How does he try to? And I had other journalists that were there came to me and said, "Hey, that was the best question that anyone asked Tony," because Tony actually took a minute and went into, instead of just cutting everything off about this matter.
Right.
He went in depth with what he gave a really good response. But because that's what people are going to wonder. How are you going to handle this situation? Because you are, and I put it, you're the leader of the ship. You're the captain of the football team. How are you going to handle it? And so Nick took no offense to any of that. I know Nick's like me. Nick's a very good reporter, one of the best out there in the wrestling landscape. He's got a thick skin. He can handle it. And I can get why people in this wrestling industry have a little bit of a hard time. Because wrestling fans are unlike any other. I was telling people this on the call, like, I can put something out about boxing, MMA, and no one really they care, but it's like they're not going to talk about it for days,
Right.
or even multiple hours. In wrestling, it's not the case, and I appreciate that. I actually really do, because it shows the fans care. Like, look at last night's Dynamite. Hangman Page got booed.
Yeah.
People know, because wrestling fans are the smartest fans. They study their business. They care that much. And I can be beyond appreciative of that. I really am. And so, but UFC fans are passionate, but like if a controversy was going on about something like this, they wouldn't care. It'd be in one ear, out the other. When are they fighting? When's the fight? That's what they care about.
Well, yeah, and then you got professional wrestling. That's probably the most accessible avenue in combat sports. So, like, yeah, you have your prospective UFC specials every weekend, but you're not hearing something during the week unless Dana White says something stupid on McAfee's show or whatever is going on. And then boxing, you know how that schedule is. Yeah, you got your promotions here there, but it's towards like the face-off at the introductions, weigh-ins, and then the fight. Like you have that weekend. It's not every day in the morning where something new comes up or something on the show happens that people don't like, and they talk about that for weeks and weeks. With professional wrestling, it's just the accessibility. It's just on another level compared to those two other entities. I want to go back to Punk really quick because you have experience. Like you said, you have to have thick skin in this game. And when it comes to these press scrums, you've been at UFC shows. You're telling me about seeing Conor McGregor fight and your experience in the past of seeing this stuff. And what I've learned from my time in the industry, in the media industry, is that your job, you have to analyze what's in front of you and use context. Everything else in between is just gravy. And reading body language is really important, especially in these scenarios. I know a lot of people think everything in wrestling is a work and blah, 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 blah. From your point of view, from Punk's body language, you're saying he was surveying the room. What's like the first indicator you could tell that this was going to go off the rails?
Instantly. As soon as he said who fancies himself a journalist, I'm like, all right, I knew it was on.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay. I'm like, I raised my hand, and he looked at me, he looked at Dave, he looked at Nick, he looked at Brian, he looked at Will Washington from Fightful, and then he's like, all right. And then I knew it was on, and I'll say it again, and I've gotten some flack for this, but I don't blame him. And I know, and it's not defending what happened in the aftermath, what happened in the locker room. That's indefensible. You can't. I'm not defending it. I don't condone fighting. I cover fight sports, but outside of the ring or the cage, it isn't necessary. To me, it makes everyone look bad. It makes everyone look unprofessional. Did I blame him for going off? No, I really didn't, and only because of two things. His name was getting rang through the mud. He's being told, and it's being reported, oh, it's his fault that Colt Cabana was going to get fired. It's his fault that the Young Bucks that they went to Tony like, hey, we should keep this guy. Let's put him. He's our friend. Let's put him in ROH. You know that had nothing to do with CM Punk. And I know that from talking to enough people from both sides.
Yeah.
Colt was very in Fightful, and Sean Ross Sapp reported this, and I'm gonna give Sean his flowers. He reported that Colt told Tony, hey, this is gonna get dicey. This was last year when they were getting ready to bring him in. Like, hey, just so you know, it's going to get awkward between everybody. But that shouldn't never preclude from doing business. It shouldn't. It's people on baseball teams don't get along, basketball teams, hockey, soccer. That's just with every professional sport. There's people that are not going to get along. That's part of life. That's part of sports. But there was never a time that Punk said he's got to go. Because generally, Punk don't give a bleep about Colt. It's out of sight, out of mind. And they didn't see each other, so why? And I've tried to rationalize this to people, and people, everyone's got an opinion. That's cool. But they had no interaction. There was none. There was some at the beginning because they were both there. They were in the same building, the same place. And then they made the decisions that they weren't going to bring Colt to TV. He was going to start doing stuff with Ring of Honor. And if they would have fired Colt or just let his contract run out, what? And someone said this, and I honestly, and I agreed with it. And then I thought about it more. What value was Colt Cabana bringing at this stage? Pioneer, absolutely. He helped get indie wrestlers paid, and they can get more money in different avenues. Pro Wrestling Tees, the podcast game. Colt's a pioneer. You can't take that away from him. Good
Right.
God, no.
Right.
Colt Cabana has done a lot for the wrestling business. There's no doubt about that. In terms of guys not in the big leagues and trying to find their path, Colt was a pioneer in that, and I will never take that away from him because it shouldn't. I don't care if anyone tries to discredit him, shame on you. But at this point in AEW, you got to, at the end of the day, this is all a business.
Yes.
What value was he bringing? He was bringing none.
Well, here's this, like, on-screen product, I'll agree with you. There's not a much of return on investment as far as what he was doing particularly. I will agree with that. But I think it'd be remiss without mentioning him being a big part of what they have merchandise in Pro Wrestling Tees.
I agree. Absolutely. 100%.
And here's the thing with Colt and Punk. The one thing I agree with what Punk said during the scrum is that him being a grown man, he doesn't have to defend why he's friends or not friends with somebody. I agree with him. The stuff with him bringing up his mom, I thought was unnecessary. But when things like that happens, that stuff's gonna blur out. Unfortunately, it just is what it is. But for me, when it comes back to Colt, I believe Colt was doing an appearance to promote the video game about like a week or two before this pay-per-view was down. And I want to get your thoughts on this from an optics point of view. How do you feel about Tony like nodding his head in agreement as he's going off about this with Colt? I get it. Colt's not a major draw, is going to push AEW to another level, but here's another guy that's still a part of whatever Tony Khan's owning with Ring of Honor and AEW. He is a person. He's a friend. Like, what does that say for an optics where your promoter is just nodding his head and afraid of Punk lashing out at him at the same time? I just thought as I was watching this go on from Tony Khan, I'm like, okay, like, first off, there's one thing for promoters to try to get things back on track. But with Punk saying all the stuff said about Hangman and the Bucks and yada yada yada, and this boss is like, yep, like this. What message does that send?
You could tell he was nervous. Watching him, I could tell he was extremely nervous. How do you handle that? And you got to look at it with, should he have stepped in, or the PR? There was a couple of AEW PR people there. There was two, from what I saw. The PR lady could have, the PR people could have been like, "Hey, one more question," and then just cut it off, because he was scheduled for 20 minutes. He went a little bit over. He went like 20. I think it was like 23. I'd seen a couple YouTube videos that had shown he had went about 23 minutes. We have to remember, and this isn't an excuse. It's just, everything I say, guys, is the reporter hat. This has got nothing to do with, I want to make that clear as well.
Yeah.
he is in a tough spot because he's never had to deal with something like this. A lot of this stuff, and people got to remember, he's coming from a completely different universe. Wrestling is different than football. It's different than NFL football. He's coming from completely different professional sports. It's like we said earlier, wrestling's a different lane. It's a different game. It just is. And he's never had to deal with stuff like this. It's easy for people to Monday morning quarterback this and say, well, he should have done this. He should have done that. I got it. It's one of those things where how would you handle it?
Right.
It's easy for us to say, oh, I'd handle it this way. I would handle it this way. You don't know unless you're in that moment. Because you may freeze up. I probably would freeze up. I'm not going to lie. But he was in a rough spot. It's a rough spot. I don't care who it is. Did he handle it wrong? Yeah, you can look back on it and say, yeah, sure. I can guarantee that won't happen again. He won't. You have to learn from mistakes. This is a new thing for him. It really is. All of this is new for him. You can say, oh, 3 years isn't a long time. 3 years isn't a long time. Let's be frank, it's not. 3.5, he's 3.5 years in, but Vince McMahon was still learning things, and Vince McMahon did this for over 50 years.
Right.
So on that end, I think, and Vince learned a lot, and it's a lot of this, like with anything in life, is trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
So he could have cut him off. Maybe that's why the Bucks didn't go right to him like they should have. As executives, they should have. And that was their fault. And I bet in the back of their mind, and they're thinking about it, Nick and Matt Jackson and Kenny Omega, I bet, are like, we should have went to our boss first and then went and handled it that way. And we all go in together. We all have a constructive conversation, which was not done. So, in a way, I feel bad for Tony because he was put between a rock and a hard place in this matter. Could he have handled it better? Absolutely. Will it happen again? Absolutely not.
Let's move a little bit away from the Punk stuff because there's another aspect of the scrum that I wanted to talk about. And I want to give credit to you because here's the thing. When Keith Lee and Shane Strickland came up for their part of the scrum, and you're having it was your question, right, about going with the audible. I want to talk about this a little bit because this hasn't been discussed a little bit. I want to get your point of view. Isn't it fair game if you're the promoter and you're choosing to sit next to these talents during each part of the scrum? Isn't it fair game to ask them while they're there if you would have done something different regardless of which talent is there? I mean,
I got Tony's point.
Mm-hmm.
Because the question was more for him. Actually, no, I did not ask that question. I forget who asked it. But I didn't ask them a question at all. I only asked a question to Jericho and I asked one to Tony.
Okay.
I thought that was fair because that was more of a Tony question than it was a Swerve and Keith Lee question. I could totally get Tony cutting it off and being like, let's talk about that later. Ask me that question. I took it as, ask me that question when it's just me. This is their time. And I got that. I know some people had a problem with that. And I saw that on Twitter. But I'm like, I really didn't feel that way at all. No, I thought how he handled that was perfectly fine.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought it was interesting because that part of the scrum kind of got a little dicey too. I'm like, just for me, just from the outside looking in, for him to go literally trying to convince Keith and Strickland that they should have a rematch at Grand Slam like that as it's going on, I just thought was not the time or place for that.
It was already going to happen. Because I asked that last night, and that was. Sorry, I'm trying to fix Hungry Hippos. Things he didn't expect on a podcast. Hungry Hippos. But no, that was the direction they were going anyway. I did ask. I just had forgotten about it until I actually saw the segment last night. Yeah. And I did ask, and that was it was always the intention to go that route. So no, that was all the plant the seed for, hey, this is what we're going to do in a couple weeks. So no, that was because I was a little caught off guard by that at first. I'm like, wait a minute, that has to be leading to a rematch. And after asking, that was the route they were always going to go.
Right. Man, it's just so crazy to try to pinpoint one thing and where things go from here, because it's like a new issue seems to be popping up every other week. And it's not just Punk related. We don't know whether what's going on with Thunder Rosa. I'm not going to get into that because there's not.
Let's make that. I want to just make that clear very quickly because it was reported by Dave Meltzer and Sean Ross Sapp. They both said there was that wasn't even. She never requested her release.
Yeah,
I heard the same thing, so that's here and go.
How do you feel about just the overall vibe from there coming out of the scrum? And there's been the stuff with Malachi Black. By the way, thoughts and prayers go out to him. Hope he's
absolutely
mentally. Bobby Fish was popping off at the mouth, and then he got his release. Miro's liking tweets, Andrade's liking tweets. It's like, from your point of view, and you and I have been covering and seeing what's been going on with AEW since the reception. And again, how Tony handled last night, I will give credit where credit's due. But a lot of times he puts his foot in the mouth for how big his mouth is sometimes, and the shots he takes at other promotions. And I'm kind of curious of how the locker room looks at him, because here's the thing: you have a talent meeting 2 weeks before this pay-per-view, and your company's getting further embarrassment and bad optics and bad press out of that. Like, how can the locker room take the guy seriously? Oh, let's have a come together, coming to Jesus' meeting, and everybody wants to beat the shit out of each other. Like, how can the locker room look at Tony with a straight face like that?
From everything I haven't asked that this week, but from what I've asked this, and I asked it a week or two ago, he's universally well liked in that locker room. Yeah, you're going to have people that don't like him. That's not everyone's going to like their boss. I get it. That's part of life. Not everyone, but universally, he is respected by everyone in that locker room. He is. Because they could see that he cares. He cares about every person in that locker room, regardless of how little or how big they get used. He cares about every single person in that locker room. I've gotten that same thing since day one with him. Yeah. Because wrestling is a bunch of egos. It honestly is. It's an ego-driven business. It always has been. It's always going to be. Mm-hmm. Everyone has, they want to do what's best for the company, but it's also it's one of those things where wrestling's like part team, part individual sport. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So, he's for the most part very well liked. There's some people that, like a Bobby Fish, who he wanted to get used more, and I could see from Bobby's point of view. Tony had one vision for him. Bobby had another vision for himself. I necessarily don't agree with Bobby's standpoints. I think Bobby Fish is a better with tag teams, where I think Kyle O'Reilly can do both. Right. I've always thought that. I thought Kyle's an exceptional talent. Not saying Bobby's a bad talent, but Bobby is better in the tag team realm than he is in singles. And that's not a knock. Look at Billy Gunn. Billy Gunn made more money being a tag team guy than he did as a singles. He was more over. Exactly. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, and it's not a knock on Bobby. And some people, he wants to be viewed one way, and he's not, and that's his opinion, and he's more than welcome to it. But guys are going to have issues. It's a business, and you look at every situation. So you look at with Malachi Black, I get it. It's a lot more of a mental issue with him right now. He needs that time, and he was great. Regardless, what people want to say and conjecture, the release was denied. The release was denied because after they were talking, realized, hey, he's in a bad spot. Yeah, quitting's not the way to go. Clear your head. Come back. Well, the door is always open. He did get a highly conditional release. He can't go wrestle anywhere for a while, which I totally get. Just because you don't want to set a precedent saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going through this," and they're really not, and they just want to get out. I get it. That's smart. That's just smart business.
Yeah.
I get that 100%. So, hopefully Malachi is okay. But for the most part, he's pretty well liked. Because he gives them that freedom, creative freedom. He lets them think for themselves instead of, basically pigeonholing them, which was what we were seeing under the Vince McMahon regime.
Let's wrap it up with this, brother. Two things. One, what's the latest with everybody's suspensions? And secondly, to wrap this up, how does this, paint the optics for CM Punk going forward? And does this tarnish his legacy at all?
I'll start with the first one. All parties have been suspended. How long? That's what I'm trying to figure. That has been one of my. As soon as that came out yesterday, and I was able to get that confirmed, and great reporting. I know people don't like him because he's associated with Jim Cornette, but I want to give flowers to Brian Last because Brian originally reported that, and we all just followed up, and I didn't give Brian his flowers yesterday, and I went and did, and I did it on Twitter. I sent him a note like, "Hey, great work, dude," because you and Brian comes from a unique background, so Brian can compartmentalize all this very well, and I think he has with Jim. But I don't know how long the suspensions are. I'm just assuming, and I'm trying to, because I've asked, "Hey, is it more than 90 days?" Because you watch the opening of Dynamite, all 4 of them were off the open. And I noticed that right away, and I had people reaching out like at 7:01. Oh my God, they're not on that. And I'm like, oh God, I know that. I hadn't started watching it. I was a couple of minutes late from getting home for my son's soccer game. So I'm like, hey, I'm not home. Give me a few minutes. Yes. So I saw that. And I understood that. So, where was I going? So suspension-wise, I don't know. I would assume, and I'm just making an educated guess, but it's more than 90 days suspension for the talent. Producers, I would expect the producers back as soon as the investigation is done.
Okay.
So that would be just, I feel safe. I feel safe enough to say that. The talent, Punk's going to be gone 6 to 8 months. He's got a torn tricep. And this is the news I will break. He does have a torn tricep. Surgery has been done. So he's had surgery. He's on the road to recovery. And I do wish CM Punk a good, happy recovery and the best of luck. And hopefully he does recover and is 100%. Because those are, once you get a torn tricep and you know this, and you look at Dave Bautista, he kept getting up. So hopefully this isn't a continuous issue. In terms of firings, as far as I know, there's going to be, from what I've been led to believe, there's going to be no fire. And as of right now, pending the investigation, as of right now, no one is getting fired.
Okay.
Unless the investigation turns out something absolutely nuts.
Mm-hmm.
So as of right now, no one will be fired, but that is also pending the investigation from a third party company. You talked about Punk's legacy.
Yeah, how does he go forward from this from a reputation point of view? I know you said that he doesn't care, but how's it gonna work for him when he does come back, if he does?
You reached out to me about the FTR interview, and I agree, and means a ton. And that everyone that has reached out about that interview just keeps blowing. I think it's done like 50 100,000 views on YouTube or something of that nature.
Yeah.
I don't freaking know. That interview went more nuts, and my intention wasn't, and I didn't blast it out because I really just wanted it, and it did itself, and it is what it is, and people started, and I cut a clip, always, and I'm like, I should have been cutting clips a long time ago. What the heck was that clip? Just like took on a mind of its own, and so on and so forth. But and I learned this from talking with FTR, and then I did a little more digging after I talked to those guys, and he's well liked, regardless of what we're all hearing, because you're only hearing one side, and I think, and you're hearing one side. Oh, he's an a-hole. Da 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 da. Yeah, he is. That's his personality, no pun intended. But he is liked by a lot of the young talent because that's the people he's been seeking out, like a Ricky Starks, Powerhouse Hobbs, Danhausen, FTR, The Acclaimed, Brock Anderson. There was another one that really, I forget who it was. If I remember, I'll tell you.
Yes, Lee Moriarty.
Lee Moriarty was another guy, and he is very well liked, very well respected, and by the younger talent because because he made it clear from day one, hey, this is what I'm here for.
Right.
Yeah, he wants to make a lot of money. He wants to do some big business. And I'm going to make this clear again. He's got an ego. To be in his position, you have to have an ego. Any person on top of their industry, whether it's sports or reporting or media, working as a plumber, working at McDonald's, you want to be the best. You want to be at the top of the food chain. If you don't, there's something wrong. You want to be the best podcaster in the game. You have an ego. I have one. You know, I keep myself humble because I know how this game is. I don't let myself get to that point. But I want to be the best. I want to be the best every single time, whether it's talking to you or writing an article, or writing a feature, or breaking a story. I want to be the best.
Mm-hmm.
That's what drives me. I don't let my ego get in the way, but I have one. We all have one. So his legacy is a mixed one because he has his detractors. He's also got people on the side. He should be viewed as a pioneer. He paved the way, him and Bryan Danielson, for the Bucks, Omega, Page. All the guys that are in AEW that didn't come from WWE should be going up to him and Danielson. Because those guys really paved the freaking way for where a lot of these guys are at.
You know what, brother? I was thinking about this like last night. With AEW, they all, and I think Jon Moxley touched on this. I thought it was a good promo from him last night. He's like, everything that's going on with AEW, they wanted to show what pro wrestling could be, you know? And I think everything that you said about Punk, FTR, and their mindset, everybody else that's worked for AEW in the past, Cody Rhodes especially, there should be a common thing to bring something different to the table. I just don't want AEW to get to the point where they're as dysfunctional at times as Dixie Carter was when she was running TNA. You know, I don't think it'll get to that point because I think AEW has a more loyal fan base and financial base, obviously, than Impact does. But I'm curious to see how this stuff plays out, my man.
No, you know, it's. I don't think his legacy should be. And I know a lot of people are upset with him. And I get it. I understand. Because like I said, wrestling fans are beyond passionate. And I get it. I honestly do. I don't advocate, and and then everyone slung his name through the mud, and I respect it. Everyone's entitled to an opinion. It's one of these things. So it's one of these things where, in one aspect, he should be viewed as a pioneer. I mean, he should be.
Yeah.
Did he walk? He had his reasons for leaving WWE, and I get it. That was a long time coming. What happened on Sunday was a long time coming. This has been a slow 3-year process. And I want to make that clear because I reported that and people are like, oh, what are you talking about? And I'm like, the Bucks were very upset when he didn't come, when they offered him to come in 2019. His view was, come talk to me. Make me an offer, not by phone, not by text message. Meet with me.
Right.
You want me to come? You want me to get off my couch when I don't have to? That was how he looked at it. And I don't blame him. Like, he initially started just talking with Tony, and then he started meeting with Tony. And him and Tony were meeting face-to-face. They were meeting by Zoom. They were having face-to-face interaction, having conversations. And it just slowly. They knew he could be a game changer. And Punk's always respected the Bucks and Kenny for what they've done, because they had those guys. If it wasn't for them, AEW's not around. And let's give them their flowers, because they deserve those flowers.
Yep.
Because without the Bucks, without Omega, Tony wouldn't have went off on and started AEW. He wouldn't have. And Tony's said that a number of times, and it's the honest to God truth. Those three guys at the time were cooking. They were the biggest. They were the biggest names in the business. They really were. And Omega, I think, still is. It's good to have Kenny back, and I think Kenny can really draw some big numbers.
Right.
I really think he can. He's one of the best in the world. He cuts with Don Callis there. He doesn't really have to cut a promo. He's got Don there, so he can. But when Kenny needs to, he can cut a decent promo to sell tickets. And Omega's a draw. I think the Bucks have lost a little bit of their luster. If you just look at ratings patterns, and I don't know how much of your ratings. I know we're short on time. I got to get going. But in the grand scheme of everything, I think Punk's legacy is intact. I think it is. I think that his story is still going to be written. I think we see CM Punk back. We will see the Young Bucks back. We will see Kenny Omega back. And I think we will see an angle out of this. Not anytime soon, but I think once cooler heads prevail, everyone just chills out, relaxes, thinks about all the consequences. I think we're good to go.
Like you were telling me before we came on, man, as you're saying, both sides have their opinions, and then there's the truth. And I want to give you your flowers, especially for I gained a lot of insight about this, and there's a lot of things that should be reminded when it comes to professional wrestling, especially when issues come like this up. Context is very important. A lot of different things kind of bleed into why certain things happen, and it's not always on the surface at the time. So, brother, I want to give you your flowers for what you did over the last couple of days. The content, the reporting's been top notch, man. I'm proud of you. Happy for your success. Make sure to follow Steve at S Muehlhausen Jr. on Twitter. Make sure to check out his work at the DAZN, MMA, boxing, premium live events. Real quick, did you enjoy Classic Castle? Yes or no?
Yes.
All right, cool.
Not the world's biggest fan of the finish of the main event, but a fantastic show. The main event was excellent, but a very, very good show. WWE's rolling right now. They're putting on some good shows. So it is and I'll end with this.
Mm-hmm.
I know people are maybe a little down on pro wrestling. I know there are people right now that be like, oh, I don't want to watch. Guys, it's going to be okay. Promise. Wrestling's in a good place right now. I really feel there's a lot of good, positive momentum right now in pro wrestling. So let's support WWE. Let's support AEW, MLW, Impact. You know, when Ring of Honor is getting back, when they get back to doing full shows, New Japan, All Japan, Stardom,
all of them.
The Indies out, the NWA, MLW, the promotions out in the UK. Let's be positive to wrestling, not negative to wrestling.
For Steve Muehlhausen, I'm Joshie. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, by the way, at Hoots Podcast. We'll have a new episode dropping later on tonight before we get to Sunday Night Football. I'll get more into the all-out aspect and everything else that's been going on this week in wrestling. But for Steve, I'm Joshie. Thank you for checking out this bonus edition of Hoots Podcast. We'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.